So, Walid, great to have you. This is another episode of Duck It. We're here in the Duck Life offices. I think it's only the second time that we use the actual recording material and equipment that we got. So, thank you for being here. Appreciate
Thank you.
the time.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, Walid is the Chief Investment Officer of MEVP, probably one of the kind of most well-known and staple kind of VCs in the region. A lot has changed since you guys started. We were just talking, it's been what, 8-10 years since you guys exist. How has kind of the company evolved since the beginning?
We've been at this company for a decade, but our involvement, or at least my personal involvement in this entrepreneurship venture capital journey has been at least about 15.
Wow.
And a lot has happened since, right? When we went into this business, the size of it was ridiculously small. And back then we did not know better. We thought that was,
And how many of there were you? I mean,
there's been a lot of, it's an interesting part that there's been this community who ended up doing a lot of either companies or funds, and we've kind of all known each other for that period of time. So whoever's was sticking around ended up being in either creating a investment platform or companies, etc. But there was a bunch of happy few in the beginning. Cool. Now, obviously, I'm very proud to see that it's a real industry. There's real resources behind it. It recruits a lot of people. It's invested in probably hundreds and hundreds of companies over the past year across all the countries of the region. It's been exciting to see the journey in every country, right?
Yeah.
It's not just UAE, but pick any country in the region that had its own path with entrepreneurship and VC and then technology investments in general. It's been exciting.
do you think you guys as an organization, maybe as an industry, have you matured? Have you gotten better? Are you more cavalier, take more risk, or is it the opposite over time?
I think it's like everything in life. It's a bit of both. On one end, the industry is still relatively small compared to where it should be if you just compare it to other regions around you, right? So if your comparable is, forget about the US, but if you're talking about Europe or Asia in general, relatively from a size and maturity perspective, we're still a bit behind the curve, right?
Yeah.
Size has to be bigger, and just because the technology industry deserves bigger investments and bigger companies and a bigger outlook, right, in general. But in others, I think also we've been we made some mistakes along the way, right?
Sure. It's the only way to learn.
It's the only way to learn, yeah. One of the things that I don't think we've matured on is this over reliance on PR in general, and and that's something that I understand why we've done it. We've been probably champions at it in the beginning, and we still are. But at the end of the day, it's like any industry: results and numbers catch up to you, and you have to answer to investors, and you have to answer to a lot of people, and it's always been the same. So there's always this hype that comes first, hoping that results will catch up, and then along the way, and we don't live in the easiest region of the world neither, right? It's not like everything is handed over to you on a plate of gold.
So when you say the PR game and the hype game,
that's one example.
Are you saying that, like, comparatively to other regions, we hype more than we should in terms of relative to the success that we're having?
Yeah, no, I'm just reflecting on some of the stuff that haven't matured in the way we do business. Not necessarily comparing to others, but in one sense, the industry grew 100x, right?
Yeah.
We used to think that a $50,000 investment was
a big deal.
Daddy.
Yeah, that's true.
It's now we're like at a different level, and there's numbers to back it, and there's successes to back it, but there's also a lot of failures. And I think one thing is we don't tend to talk about our failures in this part of the world openly.
I think a great example of what you're saying is what was revealed about AWOC last week.
Yeah, I've read a lot.
Yeah,
about
so
that.
I mean, a lot of us were aware of it for the last 6 months, a year, that they were a struggling business, etc. But finally, the news broke, and I read it off Magnet, I think a company that you guys are invested in. That unfortunately they had to shut down, and
Yeah, well, I
and
mean,
a
there's
previously super successful company. Right?
there's a lot of examples at companies that shut down, reboot, and it doesn't reflect necessarily. I'm not in it. I'm not here to judge, or I just don't know the facts, and
Sure.
But my point is, could we use this example or other examples
To
to
learn.
learn, right? And what are the learnings? Have there have there been management mistakes, investment mistakes? Have they, on paper, a lot of these industries and a lot of these sectors make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell everybody is like, you got to be excited with the idea. You got to be excited with
course.
the big picture. You have to understand it. But then 99% or 95% post that excitement is execution. And you have to keep the 5% of excitement so that people keep on buying to your story. And I believe in positivity, the power of positivity as a driver. But I think one aspect we could mature in here is just talk more openly about these things, and not to point fingers or blame, but just constructively. I simply don't know a lot about these cases, and I think that merits probably
An episode
on its own.
So, I mean, you're probably the most seasoned kind of investor that I know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess that's a compliment. But I always wondered, how do you kind of measure a founder, a leader, a CEO? How do you know? Because in my experience, like startups and P&Ls and forecasts and
That's a great
strategies
question.
are 99% fluff, and they can be challenged, and
So,
there's not much science. So how do you guys do that?
One thing I learned in this business is it's been in a journey into human behavior than anything else, because people change.
Yeah.
Right. You change, people around you change, your family changes, your friends change. Right. So you cannot not expect the person that is your partner in a company, in an investment, not to
change.
not to change, not to be
Yeah.
to remain flat and stagnant over years. And how do people change? They change in all sort of ways, positively, negatively. Some grow to become better leaders, better humans. Some actually become more different, right? They go into the opposite side, and I've seen both. I've seen people corrupted by money. I've seen people changing and have allowing negativity, doubt, a small thinking, fear, and that reflects in the business. And I've seen a lot of fights on boards, and a lot of fights between investors and between founders. And we have companies that broke down, but just founders fought because founders actually fought between each other. And I've seen companies where investor fought, and that's also, to your point, we're people at the end of the day, and we come with our flaws and baggage, and we try to make the best out of it. But then what happens when greed and fear kind of take over? And this is where it's interesting.
So it kind of sounds like there's like an emotional evaluation, not just an intellectual kind of or experience based one.
Look, you can.
How do you do that?
Yeah, you can become very cynical in this business very quickly, because reality is, in numbers, you see more failures than successes. That's the nature of the business. But and from a bandwidth perspective, you always naturally trying to fix things that not necessarily going to be fixed. So it drains a lot of your resources and a lot of your thinking, trying to go after the squeaky wheel, right? Not after the and that's all perfect human nature. So how do you mature doing this? Is to learn from the get-go, learn to let go, learn what matters, learn what is it that you can restructure, what you can salvage, what you can save, and that's kind of the skill set you get.
And is what makes you a good investor your ability to read and interpret that?
Well, I many years ago, I was I met a a very experienced venture capitalist who told me something. Told me in order to be a good venture capitalist, you need to have spent 10 years and lost $10 million. And I found this advice. I mean, these words still resonate with me today because time and money kind of teach you a lot. You never get it right. Your checklist gets better, but then again, sometimes it's.
I mean,
luck.
that's super interesting because if we look at the landscape of the VC world in the Middle East, I think we went from zero to hero in terms of numbers. You know, a handful of VCs to 100 VCs in no time. And
That's
I don't,
crazy.
and I don't think it took 10 years. I think it happened.
Yeah.
I think there was a slow increase, and all of a sudden the hockey stick came around, and within 3 to 5 years we have like 100 VCs. So I really doubt everyone has 10 years of experience, right?
Well, that's something I still remember as a. I don't know if the magic number is 10-10 or 15-15 or.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's a nascent industry. I mean, over the past 5 years alone, I think most of the brands have been created. Right, that's it. It's a 5-year journey, and for most of them to see the end of their first funds, because funds are a 10-year journey.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, look at the data all over the world. Some funds, even in the U.S., are in their year number 14 or 15 when you count for extension periods. So you have to see through a fund one time to understand like the whole cycle,
how things work.
At least once, and then you become better when you see it 2 times and 3 times. But we're in our business, and I always tell this to people: you don't go into VC just hoping that you're gonna have an outsized return, right? If you wanna make money, honestly, go build a business, and you better build a solid business and sell it or make it very profitable. But the VC industry per se, because it has a 10-year cycle, you have to have a lot more than this dream of becoming a billionaire or whatever, right? Because it takes time, and you have to be very patient in this business.
But what's your kind of opinion? I guess what I'm trying to get to is there's a lot of VCs, there's a lot of investments happening. I think every day I get another update from Magnet telling me somebody invested in this or this company got, raised X amount of money. And I've, on an amateur way, started investing myself,
That's good.
And
we need more of you.
Yeah, but I can't, I mean, I don't want to rub anybody the wrong way, but I can't confidently say that the market is exciting.
Look at supply and demand. Of course, no. It's
I'm not finding that much great opportunity or great companies. It's not. I don't feel like I'm overwhelmed with opportunity.
You have to call a spade, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to say things for the greater good. It's a supply demand game. From one end is money supply, and the other is quality executioners or quality ideas or quality companies. And once that supply is broken in one way or the other, distortions happen, whether they're valuation distortions. Sure. Or in one way or another, and that creates lower returns, and then that creates frustrated investors, and that creates more noise, and less. That's the feedback loop here could be very negative. And I've seen this in other markets. I mean, I've seen this in markets all over the years. There's a lot of sometimes oversupply of money. A lot of fund managers, VCs come in. They want to all, and they come with the best intentions in the world. They come on the back of a real case, which is this region needs VC. That's real. No one can argue against that.
Yeah.
But then what happens on the ground becomes a bit interesting because there are fights on deals. There are fights on valuations. There are fights on market share. There are fights on positioning, and the counter argument that I've heard has always been, too much money in the system is good for entrepreneurs because they can shop around, and that's perfectly fine, and that's great. But the back end of that answer, I mean, the flip of that answer is, if you're an entrepreneur and you're able to raise your money today at your terms, and you think you're on top of the world, and you got the valuation you want, and it doesn't mean much because it's just a number on a piece of paper.
It's a false positive.
It's a false positive up until you're in the next round, and then, oh, damn.
Yeah,
I
reality
need to justify justify why did I. So again, it's like, and people take this. A lot of people take this feedback negatively. A lot of entrepreneurs get offended too quickly, in my opinion. A lot of LPs miss out to understand that they don't have to deploy in this industry, quickly. This whole fear of missing out can be, contained. A lot of investors also can just come to the realization that they can't do it themselves, right?
Yeah.
So they probably have to organize or join a fund or join an angel association, or there's a lot of value in working together in this industry, and supply demand distortions, whether it's money supply or startup supply, will get you to frustrations and distortions. But it's since we're in a free market philosophy, people will tell you the market will adjust itself. Yes, it will adjust itself, but remember the LPs, the investors, the angel investors, once they're also humans, right? At some point they're not institutional and serious about deploying in VC on the longer time. 3 years into it, they're gonna say, you know what? Let me do something else. Let me go try to build directly. It's a nuanced conversation.
I always wanted to ask this question. I don't know how openly we can discuss it, but I find it an interesting relationship between a VC and its LPs, or a VC and where it raises its money, or who it raises its money from, and its ability to kind of build a Chinese wall so that it doesn't get too influenced from where it kind of got the money from. I mean, even on the startup side, I remember in several different scenarios in different companies along my life, where we raised money and who we raised money from had inevitably an impact on our business.
Correct.
Right? Their influence, their voices,
Correct.
their ways of doing things. Somehow, some way, when you borrow money from somebody,
Yes.
you have to give them the stage, or you have to listen. So how much of that is true in VCs today? Because when you look at the region, sure, there's 100 VCs, but when you look at who the biggest, where the biggest cash piles are, they're typically generally the same clusters of groups.
Correct.
These 10 family offices, or these sovereign funds, or this, big company, or et cetera, et cetera. So how do you, I guess as MEVP, how do you kind of keep your integrity in terms of your investment philosophy when you have these types of relationships? How do you do that?
So you're touching on multiple points.
Yeah.
The first one is the relationship between VC and its investors, and entrepreneurs or people don't understand what that really means. At the end of the day, every fund we come up with, we treat it as a standalone company.
Sure.
Right? We're in Fund 3 now.
Yeah.
We've raised multiple funds. Every one of them is a standalone investment journey and has its own investors, and it has its own philosophy.
Sure.
And that's one. Two, a lot of investors, you would want them to keep on following. And a good sounding board for a VC is whether your LPs keep on investing with you from fund to fund and follow you through your journey, right? That's a great validation of your capabilities, your name, etc. And three, there's always a symbiotic relationship with what sometimes they see in the market and they call you for advice, and what sometimes what you see and you call them for advice. And this dialogue, you cannot tame it or avoid it. It's an honest dialogue between institutions interested in the success of an industry. So if they call you up for advice, it's your ethical duty to give the best advice to the best of your knowledge, right, to your investors, and also vice versa. And that's what makes that partnership interesting. Now, I've had situations where the advice you give is probably not what somebody would want to hear.
Sure.
Or probably, and you can deal with that, right? And you deal it with your own opinion, integrity, because at the end of the day, that business, you invest in public equities, markets tell you the price, you make money, you have a lot of things that are solved for in public equities, but in private equity and in venture capital, you don't.
Yeah.
right? So what's your view on a sector? Your view on your sector, you could be right or you could be wrong. It's
Sure.
built on your bias, on your data.
Your own experience.
One thing interesting in that industry, and I think a lot of and that it took me a lot of time to understand and really understand what it means, is your ability to have quality information, right? Because what's going to tip the balance in an investment or not is that extra amount of information, or that extra little information that you hadn't had a week ago
Yeah.
before you call the shot on an investment. And the better the platform becomes, or the VC becomes, at getting that extra info makes a whole difference, right?
Of course.
And so therefore, and you cannot get this info by locking yourself up in your living room. It's just, you have to be out there. You have to talk to people. You have to exchange ideas. You have to share certain secrets and do it in confidence, and that what makes that.
And do we have those resources, that information here?
Well, I mean, I tend to apply it in my job, or we tend to apply it in our job, in a way where we always try to get the full story of an investment, the good and the bad, because we know there is no perfect startup.
Sure.
That does not exist. The flip side of that is coming and saying no too quickly.
Too quickly.
Right? No is probably the fastest decision, because that's like not even a decision. It's a no. So there are flaws. So it boils down to, what information do you have on this sector or this team that's gonna make a difference? What information can you bring to the table in the form of a partnership or a connection or a talent acquisition or a market entrance or some info that's gonna make your investment much better, right?
Yeah.
And that's the secret sauce of that game.
It's funny, like every single time I've said no,
Yeah.
it was 100% based on the entrepreneur.
Okay.
It was never the sector, the industry. I was always excited. If I was pursuing conversations and exploring this type of relationship or an investment, I was always sold on the opportunity, the idea, the sector, the solution, whatever it was. But if I ever declined, it was always based on the entrepreneur.
Fair.
Always.
And that should be always the case, because if the entrepreneurs or the founding team do not rise to the challenge, or if there's issues there, then you should definitely not invest. However, there's always a nuance in certain things where information can make you win. Let's say, and it's a mistake I've been through many times in the past, and I learned to let go. There are a lot of competitive forces in a market, right? And you always tend to want to invest in the number one and be the number one, assuming that this is a one market take all.
One player take all.
One player take all, exactly, a strategy. But reality, there is no such thing called one player take all strategy.
No.
There is no such thing. I mean, that's a bias that investors have, and sometimes they walk out of a deal because saying, okay, competition is gonna come and eat your lunch, or
It's not
you have like
defensible,
six.
or-
It's not defensible. Reality is, in the digital economy, there will be a lot of players.
Sure.
There is fragmentation, and if you don't end up being the number one, but you're the number two, and that's not bad of a result.
Sure.
Right. Second is another problem and this is also about industry insights and information. And I'm labeling everything as information. Probably I should break it down. But industry insights are key, right? Because some business models simply don't make sense to you.
Sure.
Because if you have to go and build market share as opposed to profitability, then probably you need to keep lining up cash that as a small investor you might not have. So you could also always come and say, okay, let me throw in a ticket and pray for an event, or and that defines who you are as an investor, right?
Yeah.
That strategy defines who you are.
Sure.
And that goes back to the conversation you have with Earth. And sometimes you can come and say, look, this is fantastic, this is great, but that's not a game for me, because I can't keep on doing this and that. That I cannot, and that defines you as well as an investor, because you're gonna put your effort making another story happen.
I mean, playbooks evolve with
Every
times,
day.
right? And I think you know, if I look at my kind of professional career, most of my playbooks to this point, up to let's say 3-4 years ago, was, you know, scale or die. Every playbook, every organization I was a part of, whether it was Rocket Internet, my own companies before in Canada and the US, Kareem, everything was a scale or die sort of playbook.
Yeah.
And that was a product of that era,
Yeah.
I would say, because of the investment, let's say, landscape, because of
The PR.
the PR, because of the gaps in the market and the excitement of the opportunity, whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, for various reasons, you know, that era seems to be, you know, I don't think it's come to an end. I think there are still a lot of players that operate with that playbook. But generally, that tone has kind of been reduced, and now everyone's playbook is, at least on paper and on podcasts and in the media, the playbook is profitability, you know, sustainability, build a business that actually works, et cetera, et cetera. What's your position on this stuff?
I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. My whole point, I mean, I think that's something I learned is whether you end up picking this model or that model is going to define you as an investor.
Sure.
Right. And that becomes your story as an investor.
Yeah.
And that story can evolve, but at least you can come and say, I did this and that and help this in this way because I knew.
Yeah.
I would have. So I don't think there's a right answer to that.
Every business has its own recipe.
Every day it's a new day. Every story is a new story.
And I mean, the VC space is starting to see, so I have a good friend from the Kareem days who recently left Kareem and now joined, you know, a VC. And we're starting to see operators or builders join VCs more and more.
Yeah.
From my perspective, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because somebody who's built it and who knows how it works, that can now be part of the check writing process, should be generally good for the maturity and the support that VCs should give the startup or the entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
Does it also bring a sense of conservatism in investing that we don't necessarily want just yet in the Middle East? Because that's, on one side, I think it's great. It's great to have somebody who knows how to build a business so he can evaluate and he can also help and support a startup.
Of course.
But on the flip side, having...
You don't want them to run it for you.
Exactly. And on the flip side also, you know, understanding that fear and the struggles might also dissuade, you know, an investment, right?
Correct.
So
People come with their bias,
Yeah.
and we all have a bias.
Exactly.
And sometimes you can just meet an amazing person and just you know, there's no chemistry, and you walk out of the deal because of the entrepreneur chemistry. So it's really there's a lot of nuances around that. I'm not a big fan of mixing up things. I think if you would want to build a business,
keep building.
go build a business. Be the builder. If you want to be an investor, be an investor. And there are
That's
successful.
super
I mean,
interesting.
you know, Rocket Internet, and I've, you know, met Oliver and know a lot of people who work there, and what made them amazing in what they do is their ability to execute.
Yeah.
Right. So they really wrote an amazing playbook on that.
Absolutely.
And that makes them a unique investor. If you want to be a rocket-like builder, venture builder, then be that. Right. So, but don't try to be that half here, half there. You know, an investor with a couple of techies. Look, I've done that mistake before, sending subject expert maps, very successful people into new companies and reality is, you know, you spoke about being successful in a company like Kareem, but then if I want to go and look at somebody who's building, you know, something in cloud or something in cybersecurity, I mean, like, this is not necessarily transferable. So
Exactly.
you're in a situation where you're also sending the wrong people. You're not giving the you know, entrepreneurs on the other side is like, you know, don't like to be babysat,
yeah.
right? And before you know it, instead of if you want to be a rocket internet, go build a rocket internet. Just go build businesses, right? And you have your investment arm that can support what you're doing. I think I really go back to that idea. What you do defines your story.
But on one side, like on a personal level, I would say like specialization. I find makes me personally crazy. I hate specialization. If I do
You're
something
probably ADD and
hardcore ADD, I can't focus, and
You can't,
and I think Lauren can agree to that. But I find specialization for me something that actually makes me counterproductive. If I do something too often, or if I become too repetitive in what we're doing, I actually lose my mind and I lose my focus. But maybe that's a personal challenge that I have.
you'll probably enjoy being a VC because we're exposed to so many different stories
Yeah.
as investors that keeps me at least always excited about what's going on.
I just want to say something on that point. It's so funny that you were talking about hand holding, and I don't want to name names, or I don't want to say anything specific, but in my career in the region, the organizations that we borrowed the most money from, irrespective of the company, were generally international, non Middle Eastern companies, and they never asked us anything. Once they evaluated, once they cut a check, so to speak, they never really did anything except do their follow-ups and board
Yeah,
or whatever.
sure. That's the way it should be.
Whereas the Middle Eastern companies that cut us checks, without any doubt, every single one of them typically would want to get involved and have more information and sit with us.
Yeah.
And
I find that to be annoying, to be honest, because first of all, it doesn't change much in anything you do. You've already invested, so the money is gone. We have a say. We say, your first mistake is when you invest, right?
Yeah.
That's it. Money's gone. You have a piece of paper with a number of shares on it. That's what you get.
That's it.
Up until second, it's counterproductive to try to understand, and not even that. I mean, there in some companies there are real IPs in how you do things that as a board member sometimes you're not even entitled to. Like, I'm sure that the board of directors of Coca-Cola probably don't know the formula. I mean, I have to check that, but to a point, there are certain things in a company that are IP, intellectual property, on the way things are run, and here entrepreneurs and investors tend to kind of it's okay to ask those questions when you're DD, but then after, once in the company, your focus has to shift into, okay, how can I help? What client can I bring? What talent am I gonna bring to this? What advice I'm gonna give that's gonna save you 6 months of nonsense work or hard work, as opposed to I don't like to get involved in the operation. I simply think, or in the tech, I simply should trust the people that we invest with.
And that's kind of countercurrent to what VCs in general are saying, by the way, in the region. And that's my interpretation. Right now, I feel like most VCs are kind of either transitioning or building extensions of their brands to become studios, right? Where they want to invest and build, or invest and chaperone, right?
Yeah, well, I don't want to comment on them specifically. I think it's...
But it seems like everyone seems to be doing that now. They seem to believe that they need to go lower down in the funnel.
It could be it could be conviction, and I hope it's conviction.
Sure.
Because I'm all about conviction, right? In everything you do, even investing, even saying no, and even saying no when later on, and your decision is the wrong decision. Stay, build your conviction on your decision, because you make a decision at a point in time. We don't have time machines, as far as I know. I wish we did, but that's
make
one.
a decision based on what you know at that time.
Exactly. Second is, maybe this is the byproduct of having too much money and trying to differentiate. Maybe it's I don't know. We have to really look into it. But again, the VC, like, our product at the end of the day is not the investment in the company we make. Our product is the fund's performance, right? People really don't understand that nuance clearly. The way we are incentivized and our investors are incentivized is the success of the fund. And the fund has, 15 companies in it, right?
Yeah.
You may have one that end up being a dragon or a unicorn and return the fund. Dragon is a company that returns your fund. And that's fantastic, but that's not your quote per quote your product. Your product is still the fund, right?
Yeah.
So that makes the whole business very different than just trying to fix 15 companies or 5 companies. You take it a notch below that at costs, and that, and where are you going to pay that from, right? Probably management fees, I don't know, carried interest, you've capitalized the company. Like, there's a lot more into becoming an operator as an investor, that behind the scenes stuff that people don't know. Do you have the right people? Do you have the skills? Have you done it before? Have you done it in sufficient verticals that you can really understand the nuance? Or is it going, I don't know, I guess time will tell.
It sounds like you're just saying there's too much money in the market and they're not finding enough opportunities to invest in, and they have a conviction and a belief that if they go lower down in the
I know. Actually, that might be true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we will know at the end when the when
the writing's on the wall.
Exactly. When all these funds liquidate and get their returns, whether there was too much money in the market or not. My point is different. My point is really build, conviction builds your actions, that builds your story, that builds your type of pedigree of a company, and that what makes you ultimately successful. Because your success is not that one great deal you did, right?
Yeah.
That's not on a VC level. I go back to this idea, people don't understand that business well enough to say that it's the fund that makes it, that's the product that you said.
So how do you describe that actually? Is it your ability to continuously
If you did one
perform?
if you did one great deal
on a year to year,
and then nothing for 10 years, that doesn't make you a great VC,
no,
right?
it just makes you lucky.
That makes you, So it's hard. Our business is hard. Every year you have to come up with something that is gonna move the needle in your financial.
Yeah.
However, my advice, if I may say, my advice to anyone who wants to really think hard about being a VC or building a company. If you build a company and you own at exit 25% of it, and it's a massive exit, you're set.
Yeah, you're good.
That's amazing, right? That's great. That's what you should do.
Yeah.
But expecting to be in a VC to have the exact
Same result is
that means that you have a
shot.
different lifestyle, different outlook. You have more consistent stories that you have to come up with, and every story you get better at trying to source it, trying to execute on it, try to help it, try to exit. Right?
So why do people become VCs in your mind?
Everybody has their reasons, I guess.
Why did you become a VC? Why are you doing what you're doing?
I honestly cannot remember in the first place what was the exact reason for it. I just got a bug into something that was different. I'm like 15 years ago, the world was fundamentally different, right?
6 months ago, the world was
exactly. Let alone that,
Yeah.
So back then, different industries, different stories, and VC for me at the early level, and I was talking to a very dear friend of mine actually a couple of nights ago about that. The origin of it was really SME support, all right? There is for me, there's been at the beginning this whole this passion towards small enterprise businesses or medium businesses in our part of the world that had no access to financing, no access to bank debt, a whole bunch of issues that VC could have. But then technology as a theme took over, and it actually took over the world, right? It's these
phones
mobile, these changed everything. Now and then the money supply in the world changed everything, because a whole lot, and then you become and I love the tech sector. I fundamentally love the media, telecom, and tech sector, which is my original background before even that stuff. So I think everybody goes into it for different reasons. I suspect that some want to have fun, some are angel investors and amazing angel investors, and then they wanna grow a bit into the VC, more structured, probably bigger. Some are just passionate about it. Some do it for the story, some do it for the money, some do it for I think out of vanity, of course. I mean, I see and I know a lot of people who would actually do it just out of vanity, but, multiple reasons. But that's a very important question, and it keeps on updating.
It's funny because the reason I was asking is I had this conversation recently too with a VC in Canada, because I just got back from Montreal, and one of my friends, we worked together. We were at a startup together in North America. We were talking, and he said, to be honest, this is basically his answer. And he said, to be honest, I don't know a single VC who didn't become a VC because they were just rich and lazy and they didn't know what to do after, right? And I'm not suggesting that's you. I'm just saying he was explaining that basically the root of a VC, or most VCs, or most, let's say, investors, let's just call them investors, their starting point is they got super successful somehow, and they didn't want to go back to building right away, or they didn't want to have a 9 to 5 or a regular day job, and they wanted some new thrill where, as you said previously, every day was different. Every day they're looking at a different opportunity.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to work like they used to work. They were burnt out, and now they had a pile of cash.
That would apply if they were putting their own money. That disappears the minute you raise money.
Sure, but it gave them the platform and the credibility to go raise money, right? So
sure.
And that was his argument, and there is some truth in that, right? I think when I look at a lot of VCs in the region, it's super successful guys and girls, that built a bunch of experience, that started with as angel investors, got some credibility, and all of a sudden now are have leading roles in VCs, and I wonder how the kind of growth of VCs in the region versus growth of VCs anywhere else in the world is different.
Yeah.
I wonder if from a nascent sector today versus a nascent sector in the rest of the world, do we have the same kind of evolution?
Yeah. No, I think we don't. And I think looking into the future, we're going to be looking at a very different industry. I think VC is changing here. It's kept on changing. It's changing here. It's difficult to get size in markets like ours that makes sense for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So the size problem is real, right? How do you take how do you make $1 billion out of VC? Right. That's the next question for the coming 10 years, right? It used to be how you make 100 million. Now we've crossed that. So, is that going to be the same story? I don't know. For sure not. What does that mean on your capacity to source, to invest, and to exit? What does that mean? Are you gonna be able to engineer your exits, or you just have to sit and wait for somebody to come and hand it over to you? How are you gonna source? Who's gonna? Where do you start? And how do you actually? And in this business, you count yourself lucky when people call you and tell you, "Look, I want to work with you." You really. It means a lot when people say that. Not everybody says that, but when it happens to you, that at least you're still doing certain things right. So that's your sourcing capability. We have also our issues in this part of the world. Multiple countries, multiple policies, multiple markets, geopolitics. COVID. I think the real economy had issues and dislocations coming from COVID, which means that your whole demand profile is changing. Where does technology fit into it? Are we going to move from tech-enabled businesses into things that we actually build and scale and sell globally? Do we have the depth? Do we have the right engineering? Do we need to partner with other geographies and other regions? All of these are the questions of the day.
Well, one thing that's changed a lot, I would say, in the last 2 years, maybe 1 to 2 years, that I'm starting to hear a lot more coming from people who are starting companies is they're raising money internationally more, even earlier stages.
Yeah.
Right? You have a lot of kind of similar VCs in different parts of the world that are now a lot more active in the region too, for some reason.
Yeah.
And they're starting to raise internationally more. What's your position on the advantage of raising money locally versus internationally? Because a lot of guys will tell me, man, I'd rather get an investor from the US, and then I'll only invest money here for strategy reasons, for for the network or for introductions to the government when I need to speak to them. So what's kind of your position?
Yeah,
on that?
that's a great question. Well, first of all, we've rarely raised outside of the region simply because I don't believe that there's enough appetite for investors from outside of the region to invest here in the VC space. They would come and buy a company or expand. That's a different story. Second, it's this business. This business is a very local business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, being a VC in China, it's very different than being a VC here or
Sure.
a VC in Paris. And why is it a local business? Because it's the sourcing, scaling, exiting path that you have to go through 15 times in a fund, times I don't know how many funds that you manage, means that you really have to be superior in those three, right? And you just simply cannot be I guess there's an empirical evidence to what I'm saying. How many VC platforms do you know that are truly international? The same way real estate or banks are, or
Not really.
Not really.
There's not
There's
that
just,
many. No.
A couple of brands that actually branched out, and when these brands branch out of their core markets, they do it by buying a local GP or hiring locally, or that's a very local business.
But they're abnormal. It's not part of their policy. It's not their. It's not
Yeah,
their
you have the
strategy.
Sequoia China
Yeah,
and the Sequoia
exactly.
India, and that's and that's one that I was
Sure.
very successful, top of the food chain VC.
Sure.
That's a very local business.
Yeah.
So that's a very simple answer. It doesn't. I don't think it travels well. You've had actually more than Sequoia. 500 startup. Dave McClure, they've
Yeah.
started, and how they've scaled the current team. All of these lovely people. They've done something that's truly global. But that is not the case for the rest of us, right? So for us to go and be able to raise and deploy on a global level, it's difficult. It has to do with the nature of our business. You could have 20% allocation to look at other regions. That's perfectly normal. You could do it for reasons, educational reasons or networking reasons. But I don't think that's a core strategy, and that's something that is extreme. And if you would do it in a very specific way. You'd be invited into specific deals as a co-investor. You would not be leading your deals. You would probably not have a seat at the board. It's like more of a passive role strategy, or less active. I don't think there's depth enough in this part of the world today to have all models under one roof. It's just
Sure.
simply, it's a nascent industry.
I have a little bit of a different question, just to pivot. And we've been talking for about 50 minutes, so I'll try to keep it short. I recently found out that you guys had an impact fund,
Yeah.
and I was super curious about that. And you had that quite a while ago.
Yes.
And at Duck Life, we've been toying around with the idea of having an impact fund ourselves, and we've been thinking about it for the obvious reasons. I think our region is got its fair share of problems and fair share of opportunities, and being able to fund those opportunities would be great.
Correct.
Can you explain to me the kind of thinking behind the impact fund, how it worked, why you did it, and would you do it again?
Sure. Everything we do in the Middle East has big impact. I mean, we're all, at the end of the day, I think, as businesses, investing locally, creating real jobs that are that foster social mobility, wealth creation, but also jobs that are transferable, that require a certain level of education. All of that is impact investing, and this region, if you would look at one metric in the impact investing, is your multiplier effect on the economy. The multiplier effect of the companies we invest in, technology, software, internet, tech enabled, is actually very high, right? Okay. If and that's something a lot of experts and economists would tell you. It's for every job you create, you're in this industry, you're creating 8 or 10 or whatever the multiplier is job behind it. So that is by itself impact investing. Now, when you're
How do you actually, if you could explain in a simple, crisp terms,
so
how do you actually measure the sustainability of that impact?
there are multiplier effects over there. I mean, economists spend a lot of time trying to understand that, and it's ICT sector or generally telecom, media, digital. For every job you create there in that industry, you have 6 or 7 jobs that live off of that job that you created.
I mean, sure, but like, and sorry to dig, but in retrospect, I look back at ride hailing, and ride hailing, okay, we created, I mean, 1 million jobs in the region, let's say, but the way we created those jobs was through kind of subsidy, right? So we cheated the market, right? So we artificially got demand by making something super affordable,
Yes.
and creating 1 million jobs by decimating another industry and taking away, taxi drivers and all this, right?
Yes.
So in retrospect today, I look at ride hailing and I say, okay, well, it's still a business that doesn't generally drive a profit. They still have to subsidize the heck out of it. Any new customers that they get, they give them a free trip to come on board. I mean, not to be negative, but generally speaking, the sustainability of that impact is, in my mind, it's not as clear as I used to think.
I think you're reading too much into it in a sense where you also have to look at from a driver's perspective how much incremental income that has had on him
Sure.
or her, and what does that mean for the larger society. And in some cases, the shareholders pay the price
Yeah.
because they have to subsidize the ride, and that's the model, and that's okay. And in other instances, no, you just created we've invested in a company in Tripoli in Lebanon, second city in Lebanon, that had about 120 engineers. It was the largest ID company in the city. If you just went there on lunchtime and saw all the bikes coming in and out, just delivering food,
Sure.
you would see. I mean, they would really see that it would be an empty street, and all of a sudden, like $50 bikes going into that office to deliver food. So it's doesn't stop at that, right? Because behind every company you create, there's a supplier, there's an agency, there is a certain infrastructure spending. So I want to go back to this impact idea. Everything we do is impact. Now, you could actually refine it by saying, I want to focus on this sector or this business, and by the way, impact does not mean non-profit, right?
Sure,
It's
absolutely.
for,
No, absolutely,
for
absolutely.
profit, because we still have investors to bring. But then you're coming and saying, at least I'm making a difference in this country, in this market, in this sector, and I'm doing it by picking up the stuff that could be for profit that no one would want to pick up, right?
Yeah.
Because there is no other player that's going to pick that up. Things around, say, financial inclusion, education, things that you don't have necessarily other investors or private equity or family office or that are laser focused on that, right? Financial inclusion as an example. Why is it important? Because the more inclusion in the system, the more, you can get credit, you can build a house, you can send money home. It helps the economy.
And on a kind of bird's eye view, it's a strange world to live in when you look at the kind of role of technology and the opportunity of technology and the ambition of technology in the world, and then you look at all the impact that it brought to our lives. But when you look at society as a whole, and you look at kind of the disparity between rich and poor, when you look at kind of the way the world looks today versus 10 years ago, I would have imagined, and if I had a crystal ball back then, that the arrival of this type of technology would really better the world as a whole tremendously. Whereas what we're seeing right now is extreme wealth and extreme poverty, and the middle class is somewhat eroded. And I don't want to get too up in the clouds about it, but it kind of seems that we still haven't figured out that recipe. And that's why, to me, when I saw your impact fund, I was super curious to see how you guys kind of decided what the objectives, what the hypothesis was, how you measured it, and how you thought about it. And I don't disagree with what you said. I completely agree. I'm just wondering if you were to do it again today, if you were to raise another fund, or impact fund. Is there anything that you would do different? Is there, looking at the region today and looking at...
To your point, I think investing in people, and to your point on inequality and, providing jobs, high quality jobs, engineering, marketing, design, etc., creates social mobility, keeps people grounded to their homes, creates hope and transferability. Even when we write off companies, and we wrote off many companies, you're sure that the people that receive the investment find jobs in
Of course.
So, and when it works and you have somebody who made millions out of it, and that person becomes an angel investor or a contributor or a role model to others, that's also social mobility, and that creates a different narrative. And in the Arab world, we need those narratives.
Of course.
We need to present and the beauty of what we do.
We need to hype.
We need to hype, of course, but the narrative has to be real, because at the end of the day, people, your neighbors know you. You're not Bill Gates sitting in the cloud. You're successful, and they would come and say, I can be like you, right?
Yeah.
And I can do that, and that gives, that's not some guy called Jack Ma.
It's not fiction.
Fiction. It's and that's very powerful.
Sure.
That's an extremely powerful thing. It's but I agree with you. I mean, we live in a world where inequality, and not just inequality. I mean, like the world is full of issues from start with climate change and go down.
Absolutely.
And we also grew up in a different world. That's the exciting part, is that we grew up in a world where fundamentally different.
Absolutely.
Technology, digitization have changed it in a way, unrecognizable way. The world today is unrecognizable, compared to 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or even 20 years, unrecognizable. So I wish I had the answers, but I don't think you cannot take the, there's always a romantic idea of how society should be, and where's your place in society. Always thrive towards that if you're sensitive to that idea, and that's what defines you.
Absolutely.
As an investor and as a...
I mean, the power of money, right?
If
you can invest an idea, a thought, a philosophy, you can change the world.
Yeah.
Walid, it's been an hour. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully we'll have you again in 6 months.
Thank you.
And thanks
Would
for your
love
time.
to. Thanks.
Thank you.